ดีค่ะยินดีต้อนรับเข้าสู่ Bangkok Off Stage พอดแคสต์ไทยอังกฤษรายการแรกที่จะพาไปเจาะลึกแวดวงศิลปะการแสดงในกรุงเทพ
Hello and welcome to the Bangkok Offstage podcast, the first bilingual podcast on the Bangkok performing arts scene.
แอมแก้วตา
And I'm Amitha.
For most of this season, whenever we interview artists and producers, we could not escape the topic of the pandemic and how it's affected their works. So in this episode, we turn our attention to the people in arts media and how they've been affected by this global health crisis.
The thing is, we've always wanted to interview people from ArtsEquator, a digital media platform founded in Singapore in 2016 that covers the arts in Southeast Asia. It's a platform of quality arts journalism and criticism that we've always admired. We just didn't expect to be interviewing them when they're facing the possibility of folding due to the economic impact of COVID.
After the Singapore National Arts Council denied ArtsEquator further funding that would cover operations for the next 3 years, ArtsEquator launched a campaign called Save ArtsEquator to raise money to stay afloat.
We speak to co-founder and managing editor Kathy Rowland and editor Nabilah Said about ArtsEquator's current situation, what it's like to run a digital media platform about the arts, and the place of critics in the arts ecosystem. This episode is in English.
ในซีซั่นนี้เวลาเราพูดคุยกับศิลปินหรือโปรดิวเซอร์นะคะเราก็แทบจะไม่สามารถหลีกเลี่ยงเรื่องโควิดและผลกระทบของโควิดต่อวงการศิลปะได้เลยในเอพิโซดนี้เราก็เลยมาพูดคุยกับคนในวงการสื่อศิลปะวัฒนธรรมและผลกระทบของโควิดที่มีต่อวงการนี้กันบ้างค่ะ
จริงๆแล้วเราทั้งสองอยากคุยกับ ArtsEquator มานานแล้วนะคะซึ่ง ArtsEquator เป็นสื่อออนไลน์เกี่ยวกับศิลปะแขนงต่างๆในภูมิภาคเอเชียตะวันออกเฉียงใต้ที่ก่อตั้งเมื่อปี 2016 ในประเทศสิงคโปร์ ArtsEquator เผยแพร่บทความและบทวิจารณ์ด้านศิลปะวัฒนธรรมที่มีคุณภาพจากนักเขียนทั่วภูมิภาคแต่เราก็นึกไม่ถึงว่าเราจะได้มาพูดคุยกับทีมงานในตอนที่ ArtsEquator อาจจะต้องปิดตัวลงจากผลกระทบทางเศรษฐกิจของวิกฤตโควิดค่ะ
หลังจากที่ทาง ArtsEquator ทราบนะคะว่าจะไม่ได้รับทุนต่อจากรัฐบาลเพื่อนำมาใช้สำหรับการทำงานในอีก3ปีข้างหน้าทีมงานจึงได้ตัดสินใจจัดแคมเปญระดมทุนที่มีชื่อว่า Save ArtsEquator เพื่อที่จะต่อชีวิตสื่อออนไลน์ด้านศิลปะนี้ต่อไปค่ะ
เราได้พูดคุยกับผู้ร่วมก่อตั้งและบรรณาธิการบริหาร Kathy Rowland และบรรณาธิการ Nabilah Said เกี่ยวกับสถานการณ์ปัจจุบันของ ArtsEquator การก่อตั้งและบริหารเว็บไซต์ด้านศิลปะและตอบคำถามที่ว่านักวิจารณ์มีตัวตนอยู่จุดไหนในอีโคซิสเต็มทางศิลปะเอพิโซดนี้เป็นภาษาอังกฤษติดตามคำแปลได้เร็วๆนี้ที่เว็บไซต์ worldwideweb.bangkokoffstage.com ค่ะ
Welcome both of you to Bangkok Off Stage.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, and so let's start with the first question. So we've seen like lately on the online on the internet that you've launching Project Save ArtsEquator. Can you tell us like for those who may not know what's going on with ArtsEquator? So what's this project about?
It's a project to save us from closing down. ArtsEquator was set up in 2016, and we actually had 3 years of government funding, which helped us to really grow quite a lot. But our grants we were not able to actually get further grants. This year, we found out just as COVID hit that we were not going to get any more grants from the state. And then with COVID, of course, all of our other income streams also kind of really trickled down. So we're really facing a bit of an existential kind of crisis, I guess, a threat. And one of the things that we thought about was, we would kind of go back to the community to say that, we needed support and we needed urgent support. So that's why we launched Control Save ArtsEquator.
Anything you'd like to add, Nabilah? Or
Yeah, I think part of the interesting thing about ArtsEquator is that we do consider ourselves quite like an independent media, but of course, the unique thing where we do get government funding, and the fact that we don't have that funding anymore, the reason why I think it affects us so much is we are supporting the arts community, right? And if we afford to pay writers, for example, we don't wanna keep up the number of articles but not pay the writers. You know what I mean? Like there's that whole like wanting to support the community, but then not wanting it to kind of like go back to a time when people were not being paid to do that writing, for example. So it's trying to do both things at once, and that's why we're trying to raise more funds. Essentially, it's not just about like saving us. Yeah.
And how much is it from government funding? What's the percentage from government funding versus other sources?
When we received, so the grants that we received would have covered maybe about 30% of our running costs. 70% of our running costs, and we then raised the other 30% through other means, through other grants as well. But there was this something called the SEED grant, which the National Arts Council of Singapore offers, and it's a 3-year grant. Yes, so that's kind of the amount that we lost. And we're hoping to raise, what our target at the moment is 25,000 Singapore dollars. And because we are a charity, the Singapore government then will match that dollar for dollar. So yes, so we hope to raise 50,000 Sing dollars.
I see.
So how is the feedback so far?
It's been really good. Actually, we raised very quickly. We've just hit 15,000. I should just say that when we first started off, our target was to just raise $15,000. But the response was very good, and our board of directors then kind of spoke to us to say that maybe we should raise it, because our initial amount of 15,000 was really like a stopgap to kind of just get us over, like 3 or 4 months. So, and we are now 60% of the way to our final target of 25,000. Too late. My math is bad.
I've noticed that you guys have been so, maybe it's just, maybe I'm wrong, but you guys have been so much more prolific and very creative during COVID, like all the things that you came up with. Nabilah, you've been really prolific with Corey. Did the crisis force you to become creative, or was it just, or you just became creative because in times of crisis, because like some people are?
It almost seems like a chicken or egg thing. because I feel like all of us, I guess not just in Singapore, right? But we're always like multi-hyphenates, right? We're trying to do all these things. And even with ArtsEquator, we've always been trying to do more stuff, like let's say on social media. But I feel like the larger thing that we were trying to do, maybe subconsciously, is like connect back with the community. And maybe like we used to try to do it more with the website, for example, but COVID, because we were not reviewing as many shows because they were not right? So we were thinking like, okay, like what else can we be doing? Because because in a sense, like we are quite niche, right? We are like commenting on the arts, or we're writing about arts, but you don't only want to be negative as well. You don't just want grieving over like theaters being closing. With, let's say, that IG series with the which character would be kind of thing, it was really to kind of celebrate arts, but also connect, tap on those connections within the region. Sometimes you get a bit busy, and those things maybe like you don't get to do it as much because of like other things, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back a bit to Kakiseni. Kathy, can you talk about how starting that versus starting ArtsEquator, how are they different?
Yes.
I remember being really impressed by Kakiseni. I met one of the writers at the Singapore Arts Festival in like 2006, 2007, and I later read her review of her review, and I was just like, wow, this is such great quality writing. It's amazing. And I feel the same way about ArtsEquator. I remember I met her one year, and then the next year, another person from Kakiseni said, oh, she's gone to the US already with her husband. I forgot her name, but she was really good. Yeah.
Okay, great. So yes, so Jenny and I, who are also the co-founders of ArtsEquator, we started Kakiseni in Malaysia in 2001. And at that time already, art pages were transitioning in the newspapers. They were transitioning much more to lifestyle articles. And it was very hard to get information about shows in KL. This was before social media, right? So either you would be part of the inside group, and so you would know that there would be this play that would be running for 3 days at this venue, and you would see it, or you would be, you would just miss it completely. And so we were really we used to go for everything, Jenny and I. And so we said, well, we wanted to set something up that would help arts companies to publicize their shows and to also provide then readers and audiences with event listings and information and reviews. And really it was just this gap that we ourselves felt the gap. And so that's how we launched Kakisani. And I think from the start, we always had the same idea that writers had to be paid. So we didn't really want to kind of support the arts by exploiting, artists or writers themselves. Mm-hmm. So even back then, when people were blogging and a lot of people would still believed in this idea of, well, I should write and I should write for free to get the exposure, Kakisani was already paying all of our writers. And then we launched something called the Bo Cameroonian Art Awards. Bo Plantations is a very old Malaysian company. It's a tea company. And they came on board as a sponsor for the Arts Awards, which we set up in 2001. And actually, the Arts Awards are still running in Malaysia now. So that was really how, Kakisani came about. Starting ArtsEquator in Singapore was, again, the same thing. Jenny and I kind of talking about, I moved to Singapore from Malaysia, and I could see that Singapore had quite a sophisticated and very developed arts ecosystem and infrastructure. There was enormous amounts of investment, both in terms of like spaces and works, but also in people. So the Singapore government had actually spent a lot of money sending a lot of Singaporeans overseas to get training. So you had really a lot of talent and a lot of product, but it was quite surprising that there didn't really seem to be like a really solid critical space for reviews. The Straits Times, which is the main newspaper, had been doing it, but already we could see that was already slowing down. The other thing I really wanted to try and explore was this idea of the region, because there were just so many interesting things that were happening in Southeast Asia. But as we all know, we're just so much more atomized, right? We just tend to either know what's happening in our own space, or else we're looking outside of Asia, right, for our reference points. So those two things, I think, really kind of pushed us to kind of start ArtsEquator. And we also missed working with each other. We missed working in the arts. And we just felt there was an opportunity to start something similar. I will say that in Singapore, it was much easier to set up the legal structure. So, I think I registered ArtsEquator as a non-profit in a couple of hours online. Wow. And we're now a charity. We've already officially got our charity status. In Malaysia, it was impossible. It was really impossible. Infrastructure-wise, it was impossible to set up as a non-profit. So we operated as a company, private limited. Although we never made a profit, we were always operated as a non-profit.
Yeah. Is it a better structure you find to operate as a non-profit?
Yes, it is. It's a bit, okay, so it is much better to operate as a non-profit and as a charity, because it means that you can tap different kinds of grants and funds. So that really helps. But being in Singapore, the drawback then is that there are lots of international grants. Well, there are not a lot, but there are significant international grants for the arts. But because Singapore is seen as a highly developed economy, most times, even though we're a charity, we're not eligible to apply for those international grants. Right. And which can be an issue. In Singapore, the Singapore government is the biggest funder of the arts, whereas when we operated in Malaysia, Kakisani was largely supported by the private sector.
I see. Was it? Oh, okay. Interesting. Is it easier to get private sector to support you
in Malaysia?
Yeah.
When I was operating there, yes. Yeah. We had very good relationships with a lot of multinational companies they were multinational companies, but they were headed by Malaysians who really saw value in supporting us and what we did. I'll give you an example. We had a really big international bank who wanted to give us money when we were in Kakisani. They loved our programs and they wanted to give us money, but because it was an international bank and because we were registered as a company and not a charity, they could not give us money. So it's, sometimes you lose both ways. Yeah. But we did get much more private sector support when we ran Kakisani.
Nabilah, did you want to add something to that? Or
no, I wanted to say maybe was it because at that time in Malaysia, maybe the arts funding system was not as, because I think now there's Cendana in
yes,
which does funding, but maybe at that time it wasn't there. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Things have changed a little bit in Malaysia. And so now there's Cendana, which Nabilah mentioned, which is actually a private kind of company, but private non-profit, but it actually has got money from the government to disperse. So it's a grant giver, and they've got some really good programs. And there are also now several foundations. So private sector companies that have set up formal foundations like Sandabi Foundation, for example, and Creator Foundation that have entered the art space. So it's becoming a little bit more formalized, and there are more opportunities, I think.
And in terms of structure, how do you form the ArtsEquator, to be purely online, or you recently we have seen you have many offline activities, so many of them the mentorship program and the Asian Arts Media Roundtable that we both just joined last year. So can you talk about that?
I think you just, I think it's impossible to just run something just online. You need the human interaction. We're all feeling it with COVID, right? I mean, all of this is great, but we're all just dying to kind of be together in the room.
Totally.
Right.
And so I think the platform and in the online, the website and our social media accounts are fantastic for dispersing information, for kind of amplifying what's happening in the arts, for building critical spaces. But offline projects are very important to us because one, for example, when we run our public programs, the offline programs help us to take the arts message outside of our core readership, people who already subscribed to our newsletter, who know about us, right? So that really helps. The other kind of programs that you've mentioned, so these are projects where we go outside of Singapore, we cover events that are outside of Singapore, or we've organized international programs where we brought critics into Singapore to kind of talk about shared experiences and so on. Those are very important for us because I see it as part of our advocacy, our role, in trying to advocate for this idea of art writing, art criticism, art journalism, and to kind of build this sense that, hey, you know what, this is something that we need to start paying a lot more attention to. And so projects help us to achieve those goals.
And how have been the feedback so far of the offline project?
Well, of course, I'll have to say it's very good, right?
It's good, right?
That's right. No, okay. Well, yes, we've had, the response has been, the feedback has been good. People have said that they have learned a lot, they have benefited a lot when we run our mentorship programs. And all our programs, and we're just running some courses now in dance and book and theatre reviewing, and it's all been oversubscribed, so we've had to turn people away.
Wow.
So I think there is a need. I mean, it's not so much that what we're doing is so fantastic, it's just that there really is a need.
And those courses, they're attended by people from the region or mostly Singaporeans and Malaysians?
Yeah. Because the courses that we're running now are funded by the National Arts Council, they were commissioned by the National Arts Council, so they are only open to Singaporeans and Singaporean PRs. But we've got, so now that we've created the courses and created the modules and so on, we could in future open it up, so run another course and open it up to the region.
And why do you arrange the mentorship program? Is it hard to find the art critics in the region and in Singapore itself?
So I actually think, and this is a generational thing, right? When I first kind of, you know, I was writing already in the late 1990s, and when we set Kakisini up in the early 2000s, it was really difficult to find good writers. Actually, you'd have a few that were really good, but they were so in demand, it was really hard to get them to meet deadlines and so on. And but now I find that there are so many strong young critics compared to 20 years ago, and I think unproven, completely speculative, but I think it's because the millennials have grown up with blogging. You know, I mean, there's a kind of certain kind of, you know, kind of person who likes the arts, but not just likes the arts, but has been able to channel that, you know, through blogging in embarrassing teenage posts when they were young, you know. Right, Nabilah? But so I think there is a kind of facility with critical thinking. Critical thinking seems to be almost second nature, because I think your generation just has grown up reading cultural products in a particular way, you know, from the way that, you know, you interact with pop music, the way that you interact with film, the way you interact with popular culture, and then of course now with memes and so on. There is just this, it's almost like breathing when I talk to young people and the way they respond to things, which I find for my generation of critics, a lot of us have a background in literature or at the most, you know, cultural studies, right? And that's the later ones. So sorry, it's a very long answer. So to say that, one, I think that we actually have a lot of talent and there are a lot of writers. The issue really is actually creating opportunities for them to write, so creating the platforms for them to write and for them to be paid. And then to come back to your question about why we run mentorship programs, if things, you know, were the way they were 30, 20 years ago, you know, a reporter would have, you know, a young graduate would have joined a newsroom. They would have been put through the training. They would have received training, you know, on the cultural desk, on the art desk, and they would have received that training, right? And then they would have moved on and through it. But since those systems actually are no longer in place, I think our mentorship program is you know, again, something that fills in a gap, right?
Yeah.
Great.
And as an editor, Nabilah, what do you do to make like the voice as diverse as possible in commissioning stories or in commissioning? Is it difficult to do that in Singapore or in the region?
I don't find it difficult because I think our team is really diverse already. So I find that, I mean, of course, we always, like, everyone has biases and stuff. So you do have to continually like check yourself. But in terms of like the writers that we think about or that we are already in contact with, like we do have a diverse pool. And sometimes we try to like, we also work with like very young writers at times who we want to like try out. And so for me, the diversity is also making sure that different voices, like it's not just about like maybe race or religion, but also like age and of reviewing that they do. So maybe they're very experimental, or you know, they want to explore like writing a review in the form of a poem or something. Like Kathy, but for me, like my appetite for it is very like I love things like that. So in terms of diversity, like I really want the voice to be like, if it can, like as weird and wacky, because I think like to what Kathy was saying, it's like the reviewing voice or space is like democratized in a way, but it shouldn't be like, oh, you have to write in this way, right? Because that's not what we're trying to do. It's also about nurturing the voice, and that voice can be as loud or as soft as, you know, as possible, and to make that space like really rich. So for me, like ever since I joined ArtsEquator, like that's what I've been trying to do. So it's been quite nice to like match the production to like the reviewer to see, not necessarily like in the most straightforward way, because sometimes tensions can also be interesting. Like, you know, someone has never reviewed a dance production, you know, how would they review it? So those diversities are also interesting.
So when we talk about the arts ecosystem, how much do you think arts journalists and critics are considered part of the ecosystem? Do you think we are the oft neglected breed in the ecosystem? Like, people don't talk about as much, or we're not, really considered part of it? And if that's the case, how do we remedy that, do you think? For either of you.
Nabilah, you want to take this or? Okay. I can take it if not.
Just thinking about how I was doing some research about like how reviewers. There's this book that's published by Clarissa Un, who's a reviewer from the Straits Times, and she was very long before she left. And it's a book just about like arts media and how she was from the Straits Times, so it was mainly about how the Straits Times wrote about the arts. But there was a reviewer from the 60s or 70s, and she was interviewed more currently, but she was saying how back then people were like complaining about how reviewers were too negative, not supportive of the arts, or kind of seen in a like adversarial role compared to the artists, like really opposite ends. And sometimes it seems like it gets better and you feel like, yes, we're part of the ecosystem, but sometimes it's like, depending on what's happening or what's in the air, like a reviewer can be seen as like the enemy. And I find that sometimes it depends on like how the wind blows. So during this like pandemic period, because of how people were, trying to do work online and trying to do something new to them, it didn't happen to us, but there were some reviews that came out in the Straits Times and people were really upset about it because they were like, how can you be critical during this time when we're all trying our best, And on one hand, like I understood why, but on the other hand, I was like, oh wow, like that artist versus reviewer kind of like polarity was coming back, and that made me feel like a bit uncomfortable as well. Yeah. Yeah, Kathy, I don't know.
You were talking about Hannah Pandian, right? I think that was the.
No, it wasn't Hannah Pandian. It was someone before Hannah.
Oh, okay. I do think that so not so much art kind of critics or journalists, but just generally this idea of arts journalism and platforms for art writing, I think it is overlooked, because if you read any kind of policy document from most countries, you almost never find mention of this particular kind of programs or an awareness that we have to support art critics and art journalists and art publications. And there are really hardly any grant programs or programs to develop criticism. I mean, it's changing, I think, over the past maybe 3 or 4 years, but before that, no. So, and I think the way to remedy it is just to kind of keep writing and kind of adding value and doing good work, Yeah.
Do you feel that, do you sometimes wonder whether people need it anymore, feel the need for it anymore? Do you sometimes wonder that, like, because now we can promote ourselves, we can write reviews on Facebook, we can create our own content.
Yes, for sure. I think that the role of, let's say, an arts publication like Kakisani, which was to try and help to market the arts, I don't think that's any longer an absolute necessity. I think the channel between the artist to the audience member is much more direct. But I do think that having a critic, an independent critic that talks about the work, and it's not about them being an expert, but in a way it's about them following and having and investing time and career and a long kind of relationship with the artwork and the artists and the arts community. I think that's where the value is, that they will write with a sense of history. And even if they're new, if they're committed, then they're going to write with a sense of the future, And I think that is very important.
Is it hard to find critics or writers that you think will be committed in the long term? Or you don't know, you can't know that?
Look, the people that we've met just in the past 4 years that I've met, I mean, I've just met so many incredible people who write and want to write and are really invested in it. I think though that if there is no way for them to make a living out of this in some way, then yes, we will lose them.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the arts media in Southeast Asia in general, like before and after the COVID-19? Like, are we all like affect the same, got affect just the same? Like, because like you mentioned in your article, in this Project ArtsEquator, that like the criticism today now turned to be like more like lifestyle contents, like the calendar news and no inside stuff, like purely PR pieces. Do you think like it's still there, or is it worse than during the COVID?
Oh gosh, I think that some publications like Tempo in Indonesia, even Straits Times has, actually in some ways expanded some of its arts coverage. You've got things like Mekong Review, The Edge in Malaysia, which covers visual arts. So I think that there are still publications that will continue. But yes, I think that COVID is affecting every sector of society, and I think that we are going to very soon start hearing about media publications that are really cutting down or closing. And Southeast Asia is vulnerable because, a lot of the countries in Southeast Asia are developing countries. So we're a lot more vulnerable. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I feel like it seems like in the region, and this is like based on the Asian Arts Media Roundtable mainly, but also like larger conversations that we've been hearing. Like it seems the arts and people who are writing about the arts, a lot of times were not being paid for it anyway. And a lot of times they were drawing on their own, like, labor and love for the arts. And during this time, I mean, I'm not super sure if they're cutting down because they're trying to do, I'm intuitively, I think so, because everyone's like focused on survival. But yeah, so I don't know whether after this, whether they'll come back. I think that's the scarier bit to think about. If the whole time you're doing it is because you were pushing yourself to do it, right? And if something happens like with this pandemic, and then after that it makes you not want to write anymore, then that to me is like a super big tragedy as well, because it tells me that it killed like a part of you that has been doing something just for the pure love of it. Yeah.
And do you think like it can change the form or format, like, from like just writing to like podcasts and or other platform, like, video blog or something like that? Do you think that it will keep the, the insight or the seriousness of the piece?
Yeah, I think all formats, I think having different formats is actually a positive. I don't think we lose anything if we're expanding into podcasts or, visual formats. I don't think we lose anything by moving into those kinds of areas. But I do think that there still has to be a place for long form written reviews. I mean, that's how I feel. Yeah.
And
sorry.
Go ahead.
I also feel like criticality doesn't always have to be about a show. So it can always be a condition that we're living in, or a policy, or, just commentary about the value of arts kind of thing. And I think at ArtsEquator, we try to do like that a little bit, to push the idea of criticality a lot more as well. Because I think like we have also been trying to think about criticality as like something that anyone can hone. And it's partially why we were doing like the public events like Critics Live that we do. That I think you all attended the Displaced Persons Welcome Dinner that we did at the end. So that's also part of like make people, like criticism is part of like your everyday life. Like you can exercise it like a muscle, like, you know what I mean?
So let's go back a bit. We talked a bit about independence, arts media. Why do you think it needs to be independent? And is it difficult with government funding in Singapore to be independent when it comes to criticism?
Yeah, I think anytime you take money, right, from a private company or a sponsor, the government, it becomes difficult. There will be times, especially because, the arts kind of space is quite small. And there will be times when you have to ask uncomfortable questions if you take your role as as arts media seriously. There will be times when you will have to write about controversies that your funder, whether it's the government or a sponsor, might be involved in. And to be credible, to have credibility, then you have to also try to maintain your independence. So yes, it is difficult. For us, it's not been impossible. I mean, we haven't had an antagonistic relationship by any means with the National Arts Council, and but certainly there have been conversations where we have, I think, respectfully held our ground. And yeah, so that's just the way it is, But there have also been times. I mean, I won't say that there have not been times when we have also kind of considered the moment. We have considered, and actually, just as an example, for example, when COVID hit, right? I mean, Nabilah and I had these conversations about, is this the time to also kind of be writing hard-hitting critical pieces about the arts, the artworks, or the artists, right? It didn't feel that, that was the time, and I don't see that as being biased or not independent. I think that is, reading the room and being part of something, being part of an ecosystem where you want to be critical, but also you want to always ensure that that there is a sense of encouraging and growth as part of the process.
It's also like being an independent anything, right? Like in Singapore, like independent artists in Singapore have to get funding from the government, and all those things will have to coexist, and then you have to find your way through it. Unless you're a rich person who can fund all your artworks, you know what I mean, and do whatever you want. But even then you can't, because in Singapore you have to apply for licensing. So it's always like something that you are going to be faced with, and with media, with independent media, it's the same thing as well.
And how supportive are the arts community about arts criticism in Singapore? Is there a demand for a robust culture of criticism among arts journalists and artists?
The arts community has been very supportive. I think from day one, they've embraced ArtsEquator, and been very open to what we've been trying to do. By and large, I think artists understand and support the need for a platform that publishes criticism. And it's not easy, of course, because we have published critical negative comments about some of the artists' work, who have in turn come out and really support us. Not all of them, but yes, generally we've had a lot of support. I think partly because the need, everyone understands and feels the need. And I think the other part is that there is a sense that we, where we come from is from a point of, with good intentions and with a sense of being very much embedded as part of the community.
Do you have anything to add, Nabilah?
Maybe later I will.
Okay. Actually, the next question is for you. Because you're also poet and playwright and everything, and you're like some of the more and more I meet people like in Thailand, you don't find that in the performing arts, at least. But in Singapore, you, Alfian, a few more people who are both critics and artists. How do you navigate these roles as an editor as well?
Right. Actually, it's funny because I used to be from the Straits Times, and I was kind of viewing work there. And it was actually harder for me in the Straits Times because of like maybe how people perceive like state media, and the kind of reviewing that the Straits Times did was more like kind of like from an expert point of view, which as Kathy was kind of saying, with ArtsEquator, we see reviews and critical writing in kind of a different dynamic. We have a different dynamic with the artists. So for me, that helps, and it makes it easier for me at ArtsEquator, because we recognize subjectivity. Like we are not objective. Like we use the word I. Like I use the word I a lot in the review. So knows where I come from or where I'm coming from. Or if not, like I always try to, say it or mention it because I can't run away from it, right? Like everyone knows that I'm a playwright or I'm a whatever. And for me, it just becomes like part of my identity. Of course, it makes it like trickier, I suppose. But it becomes part of your craft, I think. So if part of your craft is trying to navigate your different identities, then that makes your review, sound a certain way. And then Kathy's reviews sound a different way because of like her other identities or, things like that. So for me, it hasn't been difficult per se, but of course, and this is a conversation I've had with Kathy when I interviewed at ArtsEquator, because she asked me this question as well, and we said if ever we feel like, oh, there's a production that I'm very close to these people and I shouldn't be reviewing it, then of course like she will tell me or I will know, and then we get someone else to review it. So at least there's a bit of an arm's length thing there where we do recognize that there can be conflicts of sorry, what do you call it? Conflicts of
interest.
But you guys have also commissioned criticism from artists, right? I remember my friend Eugene Tan, Becca DeBus, you've also hired him to write a review about something that has to do with drag and all of that. Do you from time to time commission artists to write criticism or reviews?
Yeah, a lot, right? Kathy.
They bring a skill set, right? They bring knowledge. So they write also, I think their writing is richer. Like when you get Becca DeBus, for example, when he writes about drag, it's not just a review, but it gives you a kind of sense of breadth and about the genre itself, right? It's not just about that particular show, which I think it's sometimes hard to find, let's say, a generalist reviewer who can give you that depth.
Context as well, right? Context. I also think it's because like reviews and critical writing are also part of like documenting the arts and the art scene. So if you have informed pieces with a lot of context, and someone reading it like 5-10 years down the road, or not just 5-10, but way in the future, if the world still exists, would be able to read all these things and have such a rich kind of understanding of what happened. Yeah.
Right.
Are you interested in, sorry, one more. Are you interested in the idea of sort of training some artists to become writer or to become critics? I mean, artists are critics in their own way. And some artists one artist has even told me, oh, but critics are also latent artists. Do you have any interest, do you guys have any interest in like training or being a platform that sort of help cultivate criticism or like criticism writing among artists?
Well, I'll answer first. Nabilah might have a different answer from me. I personally don't think we've set out to kind of create that kind of hybrid. But what we have found is that artists who are interested in developing a critical voice have come to us. It's not, it's more that if they might have that desire, then I think we're a good place for them to come to maybe develop that a little bit. But not something, that's been a focus for me. Nabilah, your perspective might be quite different.
I mean, I agree with you, but I was going to say that, like, I've heard from artists who also review, who say that being a critic is just part of like the things that they do as an artist. Like it's kind of what they bring to the table includes writing reviews. There was something else, but I forgot. Sorry.
It's okay. It's late. And go ahead.
Okay. So after the fundraising, what are your plans for ArtsEquator? Or do you have like specific goal after this?
Or dreams, dream projects?
Dream projects. Sleep. Okay. So I'm reading let's see. I think we have to relook our operations, I think, to make sure that we can go back to reviewing and publishing original articles. So we want to kind of get right back into it. The funds that we've raised, it won't solve all of our financial issues. What it's done is it's actually bought us some time. It's bought us some time so that we can spend the next maybe 6 months also looking for other ways to raise more income to keep us going. And I think, I've always felt this, right, coming from a kind of arts management background, that it's really important for arts organizations to diversify their income. That, it's, if you're a single source organization where your money is only coming from either the state or from a sponsor or from private sector donations, then you are in a very vulnerable position. So ideally for me, I think I would like to have ArtsEquator after this fundraising. I would like to find a way for us to diversify our income. So, a combination of reader support, private sector donations, state grants, ad sales, and then project management. That would be, because the hustle we still have to hustle, right?
Yeah. Maybe just to add, I think personally, it will be really great if we can find a way to sustain ourselves to cover more of the region. Because we do try to do it, but often it becomes like, oh my God, I need to cover this country. Oh no, now that country, and then okay, this country. Yeah. And because Southeast Asia is quite big as well, so even one article per country that is not sufficient for some countries. They are very diverse and rich ecosystems, and that to me is something that I wish we had the capacity to do all the time.
All right.
I'm curious about talking about the region. Do you think the language is also the barrier? That's why arts critics doesn't combine as one and be that strong in this region?
Yeah, language is definitely an issue, and then with language comes class, right? Because a lot of times, so you have our common language is all English, and that already means that we're all of a certain kind of class, generally speaking, right? So that's limiting in terms of readers, and also limiting in terms of our worldviews. So language is an issue. We have been able to publish articles in Malay and Bahasa Indonesia, and we would like to do more. Yes, language is an issue.
And you would need more money to translate as well, right? Or to find someone to find articles for you to to translate.
Ideally, if there was funding, then there's nothing to stop. For example, let's say an article that you wrote for us. Let's say you could write it in Thai, and then we could just pay for the translation and publish it in English. Right. So but it is about funding at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Let's go to the last part. The questions that we did not send you in the lightning round. We always do this game thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a surprise.
Usually we come up with our own questions, but this time we want to try the Proust questionnaire. We picked questions that you may be able to answer quickly, so that and nothing too personal. So shall we begin? And let's go. Kathy first, and then Nabilah second with every question. Just 10 questions. First one, what are your favorite names?
Oh, Akila, my daughter's name.
Farah.
Okay. Who are your favorite writers?
Zadie Smith for fiction. And oh gosh, I feel so bad. And at the moment, Eka Kurniawan from Indonesia, who I'm totally in love with at the moment. Yeah.
Oh my God. Hari Sharma.
What's the second one? Sorry.
Tan Hao.
Oh.
Yeah.
What is your favorite occupation?
Arts busybody.
Writer.
If you could change one thing about the arts ecosystem, what would it be?
For artists to be valued as venture capitalists and accountants.
Wait, what was the question?
If you could change one thing about the arts ecosystem, what would it be?
Less divisions.
What is your most treasured possession?
I don't have any possessions that are very... No, I don't have any possession that's very treasured, I think.
Okay.
People.
Yeah, maybe like a ring my mother gave me.
Oh. Go ahead, Anne.
Which words or phrases do you most overuse?
Which what?
Which words or phrases do you most overuse?
I think.
Yeah, same and kind of.
Okay. What is your greatest extravagance?
Oh, gosh. That's a really hard one. What's my greatest extravagance? Oh my God. I need to be more extravagant. Like really good food. Yeah, really good food. I should have said something like books, but yes, food.
Okay, food.
Indulging my own procrastination.
Oh, all right. Where would you most like to live?
I like living in Singapore, so I think I'm where I think I am where I'm happy at now.
Okay.
Yeah, same.
Oh. Okay. Which talent would you most like to have?
Oh, to draw, to really be a really amazing artist.
Wow.
Oh my God, every critic is a frustrated artist.
Right? A latent artist.
I think keeping the deadlines.
Wow. Okay.
You do keep to deadlines. Come on.
Yeah. So the last question, what is your current state of mind?
Oh, I'm anxious because I'm preparing for a talk on Friday that I've still not done.
Wow.
Yeah, general anxiety. Yeah.
Oh.
COVID anxiety.
Yes. All right. Thank you, guys. Can you tell us where we can follow ArtsEquator and where we can donate to
fundraise this
Yes.
Safe ArtsEquator?
So you can go to artsequator.com for our articles and our podcasts, some fantastic articles and pieces. And to donate, you can go to giving.sg, giving.sg, and do a search for ArtsEquator.
Any last word like about ArtsEquator or arts ecosystem that you want to like express?
Okay, I wish everyone who's listening is safe, and that I hope to see you all in a theater space together soon.
Nabilah?
Yeah, I guess things are really hard now and we're all trying our best to find, our answers and ways through it. But I think that we will see the other side hopefully soon.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to
Thank
both
you
of
so much. It was really fun. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. Bangkok Offstage is created, hosted, and edited by Kathy Rowland and Amitha Amranand. The intro and outro tracks are Quicksand by Wild Light and Probably Shouldn't by Jay Lang.